in our lesson last Monday, okay, we talked about how the skull, understanding the skull and what's under it, and why we need to know. Okay, we talked about how this is coming out to you, it's light. This is going back in space, it's dark. This is light, this is dark, and that's the reasoning why we need to know this. Okay, now. Anytime you start with anything, the body form, you always have to think what is underneath it. Now, second step, we talked about the eye. The basic form of the eye was that wonderful circle, okay? Now, from that circle, what do? We then, again, what is the circle? What is the circle and what is this that I'm putting on it? This is relatively the skin. It's like there's a slit in our skin, and the slit is on one side curved, and then on the other side it's pointed, okay? This area here is where the tissue lies and where the tear duct lies. Then you have two concentric circles that make up that particular eye form. Now, sometimes the eye is within here, sometimes it's up here, sometimes it's off to the side, depends on what direction the eye. I'll tell you what, let me make it different. I think last week I did it, yeah, so I'll make them big and bold like they're open. Now, next thing that we talked about is how you work with your shade and shadow and value. Here I'm using one color. Do you have to use color? No, you could use, like I said, ballpoint pen. You could use pencil, or you could use color pencil. I put it on teams what medias you can use. Now remember, it's 9 by 12, which means that you're going to be using your sketchbook in order to create this, we call it practice, okay? It's called pre-portrait. It's the practice before you get to the portrait. Now, so you work with your light and dark value, okay? Those that are working with pencil, it's kind of the same thing what I'm doing, but now you work the same way with pencil, going light to dark, things that go back in space get dark, things that come out to you get light. And then the next step after that is that you start thinking, okay, what other colors can I put with it? In this case, if you're working with color, okay? If you're not, if you're working with pen, it stays there. If you're working with pencil, it stays at that point. Now, if you're working with color, this is where you have to get a little bit more inventive with that color wheel, okay? Now, because I'm working with pink, I'm gonna work with two other shades. I'm gonna work with red, and I'm also gonna work with orange. So I went ahead and I did this pink shade, okay? I did the pink. I'm gonna do the red, and I'm gonna do, actually the orange falls in between here, so please forgive me. Now, so started with the pink, that's the lighter shade and form. Now I'm gonna go to the darker shade. So in my darker area, I'm just gonna go ahead and hammer down and come in with a very dark value of my red into my darker area, because according to theory, they say that you could use the analogous tone inside the darker area. Okay, the darker analogous you use in the darker area is what they say. So I'm going to hit up both areas there with my darker shade and value. Darker shade and value right in here. And then I'm going to come into here also with the same thing. Now, next step, I'll go ahead and use my orange in the lighter shaded area. Okay, so there, but now I'm starting to lose now the pink that's in there. So in a few minutes, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring back the pink, and I'm gonna come down a little bit stronger with my pink so it shows a bit more, so that transition is better, because you want the transition to go from the red pink to the pink orange all the way down. So now that's where I'll kind of stop a bit. Now another thing too, if you want to, the shadow in the eye, that's usually casted by the upper eyelid just along here. The skin that shows in the opening of the eye, because there's thickness in this the skin that's above the eye and thickness at the bottom as well. So you have to take that into account. You're going to see a little bit of it. Sometimes you see a little sliver slim piece at the bottom, at the sides. Sometimes it disappears up in this area usually. Now, I'm going to come into my eye with the pink, which I already have the red. And now let's say I want to really tweak it. If I want some more, let's say, darker value, I'll hit my area up with purple or blue. Actually, preferably the purple, but just because I am working with blue right now because just to get over it. But yet the thing is that the blue with the red, it turns into purple optically. So it kind of works. You don't necessarily, just by adding that on top, it appears to be a purple because the red is underneath it. Now, we talked about lashes and how they group together in threes last class, okay? Now, that's basically the basics. And it's on the video that I posted to under our video area, okay? I made now a video area, which, because some kids got confused, they didn't know where to find some of the videos, they were in the postings, everything was together. So I kind of separated it so that way it becomes a little bit easier to understand. As a matter of fact, I will post this video too to help you. So that's just the eye. Then we talked about the nose and how, you start with the triangle. And I think the last time I demoed the round nose and the square nose. I'll tell you what, today I'll demonstrate the triangular nose, okay? This triangular nose, you start with one color the same way. You get a light, a medium, and a dark area first. And then what do you start doing? You start thinking, okay, now I got to round it out. Round out my edges. Things that go back in space get dark. Things that come out to you get light. So you start putting that in. Put in the nostrils. You put in the shades that you need. You build the forms, okay? What's going back in space, what's coming out to you, you put that in. Now that, again, I'm just working with the orange, okay? I'm building my light to dark, my value variation, using my technique, which is blending, and my medium, okay? Now, I'm gonna come into it with a little bit of red, little bit of red in the edge, little bit of red up in here, just to give it just a little bit of a punch so that way it projects outward, okay? And then in my lighter area, I'll tell you what, I'll hit it up with some yellow, okay? So now I did a red, orange, and yellow nose. I could have left that white. That would have been a little bit better, but that's okay. We could leave it the way it is. Now to make it super dark in this area here, you might want to just pop just a little bit of the purple into this area, just so it knocks it further back, a little bit further back, and there you go. That is the nose. So we got the eye and the nose, okay, that you might need. All right, now, next step. I promised today I would go a little step further, okay? And I would demonstrate the mouth and the ears, okay? Now, so the mouth, how does it start? First of all, in order to draw the mouth, I want you to think of a few things, okay? I want you to think as you look off to the side, and then mouth is looking out into the distance, the side view, a few things that you have to think about. Like we did before, this is coming out to you, it's light. This is going back in space, it gets dark. This is light, this is dark, okay? You gotta think about those nuances. Another thing too, along here it gets super dark, medium, and then the upper lip is usually darker than the lower lip, okay? That's just the dynamics of it. Now, how do you start with drawing the mouth? Actually, the sheets are online. You could look at the ditto copies that I put up online to help you. Okay, so now here we go. So we did the 2 double triangles and an elliptical form first. Okay, that's the first step. Then the second step is you start rounding it out. Round it out, and whatever happens at the top usually happens in the middle. Next stage after that, I tend to go with the darkness around the lips first, because it's just, that's the nature of it, okay? The nature of it is that those areas go back, so they will be darker, and that will allow the mouth to protrude outward, okay? To give it that illusion of depth and dimension, the chiaroscuro that we've talked about before, okay? So I tend to go around the mouth first before I delve into this area. Now here, I'm gonna press down. Another thing too, I'm sure you're learning, there's a lot of pressure and patience in art, a lot of layering in your shades and your values. You're working with pressure, you're pushing the lead down strongly, you're lightening up the touch in certain areas for lighter shades. So let me get this person in. Okay, now, so what we're doing, you're building this form slowly, thinking of what's coming back in space and what's going back, what's coming out to the viewer. And you're working with one shade first. Like I said, if you're working with pencil, this would be the only thing that you do. If you're working with ballpoint pen, again, same thing. But if you're working with color, like I said, use the color wheel. The color wheel is extremely important. Okay, now because I went ahead and I used blue, okay, these will be the shades that I use. I'm going to use blue. I'm going to use the darker blue. And I'm going to use a green, and if I really want to get crazy, I'll go ahead and use a yellow. Okay, so those will be the 4 shades that I'll use. Now, in here, because it's darker, they say if you pop the darker value, that it'll give it the appearance like it's going further back into space. And just like they said, it actually happens. Okay, you know, this is all theory, guys, and then theory, you got to test the theory. And then when you test the theory, voila, you find out, hey, they know what they're talking about. It's just, you know, hey, why have to do double work? You know, if they say it's going to work, try it. Okay. Now, the next shade I'll add in there is a little tinge of green, and I'll do it in the upper lip. Green lips, ew, what'd they eat? Okay. I got an Avatar. That's what this is, right? Avatar. That movie. That was a cool movie. It's such a beautiful film. I cried in the film. It was so good. Okay, now pop my yes, dear?
Do we have to color the art?
Pardon?
Do we have to like color the art?
Yes, that's what I said. Didn't you read the instructions in Teams? I said you have to, whenever I say the words, fill in using your choice of media and your choice of technique. That means that I want you to color it in, okay? Whenever I say those words, that's what that means, okay? Now, I went ahead and I did the mouth now, so we did the mouth, and we did the eye and the nose, okay? Or I think it was the other paper, I'm not sure. All right, well, now the next stage is the ears, okay? Now, don't worry, I'm gonna tell you where you should be by the end of the period, okay? I know you're not gonna be on the ears, that's for sure, and I'll tell you what we're doing. All right, so the ear. With the ear, it kind of starts like a C. Like a backward C, or like maybe a pear shape. Yeah, it's like a pear shape. Then you think about that, things that go back in space, things that come out to you. So you quickly make those areas, you know, kind of go back. Now, another thing too, in the ear, it's got this crazy little design, and the whole reasoning behind it is so that our ears channel the sound, okay? So that it makes its way through. This whole area is darker, and we get this weird edge just in here, and everybody's ears are slightly different. I mean, just look around in your home later when you can. Look at everybody's ears. They're kind of weird. Everybody's a little different. I find ears the most peculiar part of the human anatomy. Now, in this area here, it goes back in space and it gets darker. This actual whole area gets darker, okay? This gets super dark because that's where that hole goes in to the, you know, the eardrum, the cilia that carries the sound and all that good stuff. Now, so I go in and I think light to dark, oh my goodness. Then I think shape and shade. I think of the round circles, you know, I think about the forms that we kind of drew in the beginning of the class, you know, all those shapes that we drew. I think about the lights and the darks that we did. And that's what I do first, you know, and you could do this with pencil, like I said, or pen. You could do it with color pencil if you have color. If you want to try this color thing, it's fun, okay? I gave you 3 different ways that you could do it. It's in Teams. It says the media, what you're supposed to use. Now, that would be the beginnings of the ear. Now, I started with one color and I used purple. So now the next shade next to purple, I could go ahead and use blue. So I'll come in and softly put this tinge of blue. And I'm going to do it in the areas that are darker. Okay, in the areas that come out to me, I'm going to leave them alone because I'm going to put another color there. Okay, I'm going to put a color there that is a little bit lighter. This area is going to be dark, so I'm going to come in a little bit darker just in that area here because all in here gets pretty super dark. All this gets super dark. And actually, I'm right now popping a little bit. I'm not sure. It's hard to tell sometimes what these shades are. Yeah, this is the purple. But it seems to be an even darker shade of purple than the other one. That's another thing. Each box, sometimes they give you what they do is it goes through a factory. And the compression has a big part to do. How they compressed it makes a big difference. If it's compressed loosely, you'll get a softer kind of pencil. If it's been compressed real tight, it's harder for the pigment to get onto the page. Now I'm going to go ahead and pop in some yellow, very soft, just in those highlight areas. Okay, so there we go. You know, I just now created that ear. Okay. There you go, the ears have it. Give me your ears, okay? Now, hopefully that will now help